Hello, this is Rob, and welcome to North Country History with Rob Berg. Sportsmen and sportswomen, I guess that should be sports people, have come to the Pigeon River Country from all over the world for a century or more to recreate in the forest. Hunting and fishing has been the primary choices of outdoor recreation for most, but the state forest is also a prime spot for the spring morel mushroom hunting, fruit picking, especially wild blueberries, and I would rank the Michigan wild blueberry right up there with Maine. And yes, I know that's fighting words for my New England friends. There's camping, hiking and backpacking, horseback riding, and much more. In 1986, these sports people included former President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. We will explore this topic in this week's episode, The Big Wild, Michigan's Pigeon River Country, Part 2, Jimmy Carter and Recreation in the Forest. So sit back, settle in, and enjoy the show. North Country History with Rob Berg, your podcast on the forest history of the Great Lakes region. I first came across the fact that Jimmy Carter came to the Pigeon River State Forest for a ruffed grouse hunting trip in September 2024. It's when I read an article in the Michigan History magazine by Dianna Stampfler. Her article titled The Big Wild, Jimmy Carter in Michigan's Pigeon River Country, and it sparked my interest. I was recording the first season of the podcast at the time, and I knew that somewhere down the line, I really wanted to do an episode, or as it has developed, episodes about the Pigeon River Country. So I definitely took note of this and thinking, wow, Jimmy Carter came to the Pigeon River Country. That certainly makes a good topic for a podcast episode, so I kind of filed it back there. But also reading the article, I found out that Mr. Carter, President Carter, I guess I should say, wrote about his hunting experience in the Pigeon River. In 1988, he published a book on his hunting and fishing pastimes in a book titled An Outdoor Journal, Adventures and Reflections. So I sought out this book. I found a copy of it online. It was used. I don't believe it's a book that's in print anymore. And I purchased it. And in there was a chapter on his ruffed grouse hunting, not just in Michigan, but it's titled Ruffed Grouse from Georgia to Michigan. The ruffed grouse is found in Georgia, but not down in Plains, Georgia, in southwestern Georgia, where the president and his family lived and where he was raised at. So he would go up to the mountains in North Georgia to hunt, and he was generally unsuccessful at it. He was found out about hunting at the Pigeon River through an old friend of his, a man by the name of Jack Crockford. And before we get into this, I'm going to introduce to you the three main characters that were involved with the hunt that Jimmy Carter took part on in the Pigeon River Country in October 1986. So, of course, the first character is James Earl Carter, better known as Jimmy, who was President of the United States from 1977 to 1981. President Carter was born in Plains, Georgia in 1924. His father was a peanut farmer, also owned a business, a store in Plains, Georgia, a small town in southwestern Georgia. And it's where he grew up. And when he grew up there, Jimmy Carter, he spent most of his time in the outdoors. They had the farm there, so he worked on the farm, but he also spent a lot of his time hunting for various game around in there, along with doing a lot of fishing as well. So it was ingrained into him. He went to the U.S. Naval Academy, and he basically became a nuclear engineer. He only caught the tail end of World War II, but he served in the peacetime Navy for quite a while after that, and he was in submarines, including the very first nuclear-powered submarine, the USS Nautilus. After he left the Navy, Carter married Rosalind Carter, or I think they were married prior to him leaving the Navy. In fact, yes, I know that. But after he left the Navy, he returned to take over his family's peanut farm in Plains, Georgia. Again, taking up doing a lot of hunting and fishing. He did that during times that allowed while he was in the Navy as well. And then he eventually got into politics. In the early 1970s, he was elected as governor of Georgia, and he served that for, I think, just one term. And then in 1976, he ran for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States, won the nomination, as we all know, defeated incumbent President Gerald Ford from right here in Michigan. Although he was incumbent, he was never elected president. That whole story, he was appointed as vice president under Richard Nixon to replace Spiro Agnew, who had resigned. And then with Richard Nixon's resignation in 1974 because of the Watergate scandal, President Ford took office and served out the remainder of Richard Nixon's second term, and then ran for election in 1976, and was defeated by Jimmy Carter. That brings up to his time as president of the United States. But during the time when he was governor of Michigan, wrong state, governor of Georgia, Jimmy Carter got to know a man by the name of Jack Crockford. And Crockford, and I have to refer to my notes here, he was born in 1923, so he was a year older than Jimmy Carter, and he was a Michigan native. He was born in Woodland, small town in Berrien County in southwest Michigan, graduated from Michigan State College, now Michigan State University, in 1947 with a degree in wildlife biology. And he was hired right out of college by the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. And from 1947 to 1948, he was employed in the department there as a wildlife biologist. He developed the tranquilizer dart that you could tranquilize an animal without harming them, and use that mostly for white-tailed deer studies. He pioneered that, but because of his Michigan ties, being a native here, he returned to the state often to hunt, and including one of those places was the Pigeon River Country. Oh, I also failed to mention that he was the Georgia DNR director from 1972 to 78. So during some of that time period was when Carter was the governor of Georgia. So they got to know each other. And so he would return to Michigan often, and including the Pigeon River Country, to hunt grouse and other game. And through that experience, he got to know Ned Cavaney, who was the Pigeon River Country area forester for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. So they were professionals. They probably met at conferences. And then, of course, with his hunting and his ties to Michigan, he got to know Cavaney quite well. And Cavaney had been the forester there beginning in 1974 and was still the area forester when in 1986 when Carter came to visit for his hunt. So Ned Cavaney served as the host for the hunting party, and the hunting party consisted of Jimmy Carter, Jack Crockford, another friend by the name of Don Carter, no relation to the president, and 6 Secret Service agents. As a former president, he continued to have Secret Service protection until the end of his life. And he was president 1976 1977 to 1981, and he passed away at the age of 100 in December 2024. So not long after Dianna Stampfler's article appeared. But Ned Cavany was the host for it. The party stayed with him in the area forester's residence, a log building that was constructed by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s. And it would be not only for the residence for Cavany and his family, but throughout the years, it was it would be where VIPs would stay at when they were visiting the forest. And of course, a former United States president certainly fits the category of a VIP there at the state forest. So Cavany hosted them, but he also served as their hunting guide. He knew the places that it was best to go to for hunting ruffed grouse. And so he took them out. It was a 3-day trip that they did in the middle of October. In fact, I think it was like October 10th through the 12th. So they were hunting on my 17th birthday. Of course, I was in a totally different part of Michigan, and they didn't know me. I didn't know they were there, so I don't know why I throw that in. Anyway, so you now know when my birthday is. So they were hunting there in middle of October, and the ruffed grouse season goes from September 15 to November 14th, and it pauses for deer season, November 15th through 30th, and then it resumes again December 1 to the end of December. So that would have been the time period of when they were hunting, was mid-October, and Cavany took them through a wide variety of locations while they were hunting. But let me get back. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Cavany, just to set up who he is, besides being the DNR supervisor there at the forest, he continued to work for the DNR until 1998 when he retired. And now he still lives in the area. I did not get a chance to meet him or talk to him before this, but he is on the board of directors for Huron Pines, which is a great organization. It is a conservation organization that protects land, water, and wild places in the Northeast Lower Peninsula and the Eastern Upper Peninsula. I'm familiar with this group, very familiar with it. When I worked at Hartwick Pines, they used to bring their AmeriCorps employees down for kind of an orientation or kind of a retreat to the park every year. And myself and Craig Kasmer, who I've had as a guest on the program for the wildlife episode, and we would talk to the students and the staff, and we would give them tours and basically get them a little bit more of a background on the history of the forest. So it's a fantastic organization. If you're in Northeast Lower Peninsula, Eastern Upper Peninsula, please support this organization. It's very beneficial to keep our land and waters and wild places still in great condition and restoring them here in Michigan. But anyway, so jumping back and forth here, Cavany, he was interviewed by Dianna Stampfler for her article, and he actually has done programs about Carter's Hunt. And I missed one for about 2 weeks back in August, when I was up in the Pigeon River. I was there at the beginning of August 1 through 4. He gave a program, I think it was on August 16th. So it was just after the end of my vacation. I wasn't there at the right time, but it would have been great to meet him and hear his firsthand experiences about guiding Jimmy Carter. And they had a great time. The first day when they were out hunting, they didn't see a whole lot, but they were going through a lot of areas that Cavany was quite familiar with as the forester in there. And they got either one or two. I've seen different reports on this between Carter's book, his chapter on his ruffed grouse hunt in Michigan, and also from Cavaney's info to Dianna Stampfler. But Cavaney had said that he kicked one up, and he shot, actually kicked two up, but he shot one, and then the president got the second one, and then Carter mentions that he had got one, and that was the only one that he mentioned. So either they got one or two that first day. So they had dinner that night on fresh grouse. Cavaney cooked it. And then Jimmy Carter took over doing the dishes and cleaning up the kitchen area there. He went on kitchen patrol, which as a former sailor, that would have been something that they would have done at the cleaning up in the kitchen, helping out in any way they could. The second day, when they went out, they had a very successful day, and they went through some good areas, a lot of tangles, fallen timber, good cover for the grouse, and they end up harvesting 14 grouse that day, shooting 14 grouse, but also 10 woodcock. And if anybody's familiar with the woodcock, it's one of the most fun animals, fun birds to watch. I'm not a hunter. I came from a hunting family, and I tried hunting a few times. I did go out on a ruffed grouse hunt with my brothers one time when we were up at our family cabin in Alcona County. But the woodcock, it does kind of a very... almost looks like a choreographed dance when it's flying. It looks like a ballet. It's in a ballet, and it does these loops. It flies around. It goes diving straight down to the ground and comes up, but all part of its courtship. And then when it's on the ground, and the males, when they're courting, it's hilarious to see them. They strut. And you could put in the background the music to Saturday Night Fever, where John Travolta's strutting down the street carrying those paint cans at the beginning of the movie. And it could be a woodcock, and it just kind of struts across the pathway. In case I saw it one time, it was one of the roads at Hartwick Pines, one of the paved roads there, and it just kind of struts back and forth a little bit. It's got some soul in it, and it's just so hilarious to watch. But yeah, it's also a very difficult bird to get because of the way that they fly, and yeah, it's I've never seen them in the forest like that where they take off flying, but only seen them when they were doing their courtship dance. But anyways, they were able to get 10 woodcock along with the 14 grouse. So they were successful that day, and that's again through. It would have been 4 hunters. Would have been Carter, Crockford, Cavaney, Don Carter. The Secret Service agents weren't hunting. They were there for protection, and I'm sure that probably gave them headaches when, in fact, Carter talks about that in his book, about how they were not happy having to relinquish control to Carter during the hunt. They like to always be in control of the situation, and this was certainly an unfamiliar place. They could not scout it out ahead of time. So yeah, definitely headaches when you have to protect a former president, especially one who loved the outdoors like President Carter did. And he adored being in the Pigeon River Country, and it was certainly an experience, and he remembered it. Granted, he wrote his book only 2 years later, so the memories were quite fresh. But he did, I guess, get a chance to hunt one last time for grouse in 1994 in Georgia, so up in the northern areas there. And at that time, he was a much older president, much older man. He was only 62 when he hunted in the in Michigan at the Pigeon River Country, and he was much more spry. But he talked about where he was going through the area there, and they tramped through tangles of fallen timber, stump fields with still existing charred stumps, which would have come from the days of logging and wildfires, mature forests, young thick growth of aspen, low swamps, and steep ridges. And it had rained some, so these ridges were slippery, and he fell a few times. And I'm sure that put his Secret Service agents protection unit on its toes. They didn't want anything to happen to Carter on their watch. So it was definitely a physical hunt for the 62-year-old former president. And this was something too for the community. Now, they didn't know that President Carter was coming to the area for the hunt. They flew into Detroit on a commercial flight, so it wasn't a private plane. And I'm assuming it was Metro Airport that they flew into. And then they drove, and the article where I read it said 250 miles north. Now, that would have been much too far to drive, but they drove up to Gaylord, and their first stop was at, didn't say the name of the grocery market, but I'm making the assumption it was Glenn's Market, which was right there off of I-75, still is, but it's called Family Fare now. And that was the local supermarket, and they purchased $147 worth of groceries. This is coming from Dianna Stampfler's article. And then the next stop was at the Alphorn shop, which is the sporting goods shop there in Gaylord. It's when I was there living in the area, it was primarily skiing and apparel, but it must have also been hunting and fishing at one time. And if they're still doing hunting and fishing, those folks in the area there, I apologize. I went up there during ski season, and so that's what they had on the shelves then and out in the store. But at the Alphorn shop, that's where Carter bought his hunting license, a 3-day license, probably at a higher rate because he was a out-of-state resident. He was not a Michigan resident. But it did say in there that it cost $21 and some cents. I don't know what hunting license prices were in the 1980s. When I hunted, my dad bought my hunting license for me. So it was definitely quite a time for them. And he got, people were surprised to see the former president there. He met them, and including one of them was Dale Franz Clark. He must have had a heads up that the president was coming because Clark was on the board of the Pigeon River Country Advisory Council, and but he'd written the book about the Pigeon River, and I mentioned that in the last episode. And so he presented the president with a autographed copy, a signed copy of his book. But for most people, it was quite a surprise to see a celebrity such as Jimmy Carter in their community. And then he headed up north to the northeast to the Pigeon River Country and had their hunt. As I mentioned, he was, maybe one of the most famous people to hunt, to visit the Pigeon River Country for recreation. But he certainly wasn't the only one to visit there. I'd mentioned Ernest Hemingway in the last episode, who came there. Of course, that was before his writing days, but he remembered the area, the Pine Barrens, as he called it. And he used a lot of that experiences for his stories on fishing in northern Michigan, and in the one case, the book or the story up in Michigan, where they're coming back from a deer hunt that had been over in that area. So this was definitely a popular place. And one thing that they did there too, besides the ruffed grouse hunting, was all other forms of recreation. And for many people, that other important one that people think of when they think of the Pigeon River Country, or not just there, but kind of that whole region from Vanderbilt down to Lewiston and Atlanta and going up over to Clear Lake in Montmorency County is the elk herd and elk hunting. And as I mentioned previously, elk were reintroduced to Michigan in 1918. There had been a historic elk population in Michigan that had been extirpated or here where it was driven out. It was either through hunting or through the loss of habitat, through the logging industry. Deer like a good mixed habitat. They do like open areas, a lot of undergrowth where they can feed at easily, but elk being taller, and then moose in other regions, they also are even taller. They like higher vegetation as well. So they can survive in a thicker forest much better than deer can. Where there's not a lot of low vegetation for deer to feed off of. But so the elk, would have gone out after the logging and, of course, again, hunting. But in 1918, they brought them back, brought in Rocky Mountain elk from Colorado, and it established a good population. And by 1964, they had the first elk hunt in Michigan. And I was going to have a guest here talk about elk hunting, my friend John Gibney, who one of my history mentors and a outdoorsman here in Michigan, loves to hunt and fish. And he received an elk permit a number of years ago and was successful. And he bagged his elk. Now, one of the rewards of bagging an elk in Michigan is not being able to ever hunt elk in Michigan ever again. They want to give other hunters an opportunity. So they do an annual lottery for the elk hunting. They draw permits, and they only have so many a year based on how many elk is out there, the estimated population. They do surveys yearly or annually. And so from that, based on there, they decide there's a percentage. They want to maintain a specific population. And I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I will get John on the podcast here. I had to, we couldn't connect in time to be able to do this in the short window that I had to record this one because of my hiatus that I had taken, and it has kind of really shrunk the window for production of the podcast. So John, I will have you on at some point, and we're going to talk about elk hunting and other hunting in Michigan in the forests or in the Great Lakes region. And you're going to be my Michigan elk hunter. I've got a friend in Ontario who will talk about moose hunting, and we'll find other people because hunting is a part of the forest history, as well as fishing, as well as all other uses of the forest. And we'll get into all of those. We'll do equal time to all sorts of recreation as part of the forest history. But anyways, so John got his elk and can't hunt them again. But the elk hunting is still very popular. And but that's not the only hunting that is involved there. Of course, the grouse hunting, Jimmy Carter is the example of that. But you've got all the other various game that's hunted in the forest. The deer, which is, of course, number one in Michigan. Bear season, coyote, bobcat, wild turkey, mentioned the grouse and woodcock, rabbit, squirrel, and other small game. And I might have covered all of them there. I'm not up on all the different hunting seasons and what game you can hunt nowadays. My dad's has passed a number of years ago, and my three brothers aren't big on hunting much anymore. They hunt deer on occasion, and that's about it. But all of them are allowed in designated hunting seasons and under existing regulations. There's no special regulations or seasons for hunting in the Pigeon River Country. You just have to follow state of Michigan DNR game rules and regulations. But of course, there's fishing. I've mentioned the trout fishing with Ernest Hemingway, and fishing on the Black River, the Pigeon River, the Sturgeon River. Plus, there's a lot of smaller creeks and streams and lakes. Pickerel Lake is very popular. And then also the Cornwell flooding, which is a dammed reservoir on Cornwell Creek. and that's a kind of a controlled area. There's a couple of dams there that regulate the flow, and currently, while I was there in August, they've done a drawdown of the water there. I think for maintenance, for repairing the dams, and I know that the Huron Pines is involved with that because one of their goals is to try to reconnect a lot of disconnected streams where either dams or culverts, poor road crossings have cut sections off on that, and they've done a lot of work in the Pigeon River Country for that. There is the Black River Bridge. I don't know the official name of it, but where one of the roads crosses the Black River, and it used to be a culvert. And because of shifting earth and with the road, the culvert had become where there was a gap on there. It was above grade level of the stream, there was no way for the fish to travel on there anymore. They got caught from one side to the other, and the Huron Pines, along with Trout Unlimited, were able to get the culvert replaced with a regular road bridge, and so there was no blocking of the river passage anymore. So that's something that is being done to try to help not only the species, but it helps sportsmen too. And sportsmen, under good regulations, help to control populations of the various species. So you don't get an overpopulation that not only puts or is a greater impact on the habitat, on food sources and cover, but it also makes for an unhealthy population of the wildlife as well. I have to have a wildlife biologist on as a guest too at some point because, again, this is all part of the forest history. It's important for people to learn, to know about. So recreation, hunting and fishing is very important, very popular, but so is a lot of other ones too. And I'd mentioned the morel mushrooms, and that is the crown jewel of mushrooms, a fungus in Michigan in the Great Lakes. And in the springtime, after the temperatures have warmed, there's been the snow melt, the rains, so the forests are no longer, the soils are not dry. It is perfect time for mushrooms to start popping up, and the morel is the crown jewel. And I will admit, I'm not a fan of mushrooms. I do remember eating them when I was younger. My dad was always an avid morel mushroom hunter, going out to the Waterloo Recreation Area and finding them. My brother David, who would have also been a perfect guest for this episode because he's a hunter. He's a fisherman. He loves morel mushrooms, and he's done all three of them up in the Pigeon River Country. But morel mushrooms, it's a very, very popular in the region there, and people will go camping in the country or in the forest in the springtime, so they can hunt morel mushrooms. And when I was living up there, you always heard a report at least once a year of mushroom hunters lost, and they have to send out search parties to find them because when you're looking for mushrooms, your eyes are looking at the ground. You're not looking at your surroundings around you to see where you are at, to pick out, something, a landmark that you'll remember that. So when you get yourself turned around, you find that landmark and you know where you're at. But you're down looking at the ground. You're looking for those mushrooms there that might just be barely popping up out of the leaf litter on the bottom of the forest floor. So it's something you really want to be aware of, is where you're at, and it doesn't quite always happen there while you're in the forest. So be aware. But these camps would, I'm driving through on a couple of the roads in the southern part of the forest where the big hardwood areas are, and that's usually where the mushrooms are found. But we found them in sandy soils under pines, so you'll find them everywhere, or anywhere. But they're in the areas there where it's a heavy hardwood forest, oak forest, maple. So you'll see these camps located just off the side of the road and just little road cuts, or, where they have opened up so when they're plowing in the wintertime, they can plow the snow up to that area. That makes for a perfect spot to where you can pull off, set up your tent, or park your camper for a few days while you're out looking for mushrooms. And so that's very popular, as I mentioned, throughout the spring. And a couple of the towns in the area, they have mushroom festivals every spring. Boyne Falls, over to the west of the Pigeon River Country, has a big popular festival every year. Mesick, down south of Traverse City, that's a little ways from the Pigeon River Country. Boyne Falls much closer, but Mesick has a big morel mushroom festival too. So morel mushroom is like the trout, one of the big attractions to northern Michigan in the springtime, all outdoor recreation. Going along with mushroom foraging, and it's not just the morel mushrooms. If you know your mushrooms, know your fungus, and there's different ones that are edible, but you have to really know what they are. I would never try to pick anything other than a morel mushroom. And I will, if I find them, I'll pick them because I know there are people who love them. And so I will share them with them because I'm not going to eat them. Pardon me, I just had to have a drink of water. But it is a kind of a whole, I don't like the texture of mushrooms. They're so rubbery, and I just don't like that feel when I eat them. But if they're little tiny bits and they're in something and I don't notice it, not going to be a problem for me. But anyways, along with the mushrooms, there's different foraging of wild fruit. As I mentioned in my intro, the wild blueberries, very popular. And you can really find those in areas after recent logging or wildfires going through. It opens up the floor for the blueberry plants to pop up. And they always say like a couple of years after logging or forest fire is when you're going to really see them when they're producing a lot of berries. And I found that also in jack pine areas, very, very good locations for wild blueberries. When I lived up in northern Michigan, I never bought, cultivated blueberries from the grocery store. I collected wild blueberries in July, August when they were in season, when they were fresh, and I made jams out of it, and I also froze a bunch so I could eat later. And of course, I ate a lot too during that time. As I mentioned, I put them up there ranking with the Maine blueberry, but again, I know that's fighting words for my New England friends. But anyways, besides wild blueberries, wild raspberries, wild blackberries growing all over the place. And if you go to areas where there was at one time settlement, farms, or small communities like where Cornwall and other little logging towns were, you may find where they had planted apple trees. And depending on where they're located, some people still prune those trees, so they will still continue to provide fruit. And it's really neat to come across some apple trees out in a state forest and find apples on them in the fall, late summer or the fall. And one of my favorite places, not in the Pigeon River Country, but down in Frederick, where I used to live, was the Ward Orchard. And that was along with the story of David Ward, but it was his son had started this orchard, and it's now state forest land. But for years and years after the orchard shut down, which was the 1940s, people continued to prune trees there, including, I know, the DNR did for a number of years when my friend Susan Teal was the area forester for Crawford County, and she and her staff would go out on field days, and they would prune apple trees, and that was good habitat, or good for the wildlife to provide fruit for deer and other animals, but also for the locals they can come out and collect because it's legal to do that under certain amounts that you can collect, and I would get apples there. So you can find that in places, sometimes in the Pigeon River Country. I've come across apple trees, but I haven't come across one. Well, yes, I did. I did come across one or two this last August that had some apples on them when I was up there. And so that was certainly something that you could find up there. But there's other old, wild fruits or vegetables growing in the areas there. If you find wild roses, you can get rose hips there. And those you can use to make tea. There's other things you can make with them. I've never used them, but if you're out in a forest area, get a book on wild edibles. Peterson's has a great guide on it. And that's always a nice handy thing to carry. And because also with berries, you want to make sure you're not, and the mushrooms, you're not picking one that is not edible that could actually be, poisonous for you. So that's all great recreational opportunities. Birding is huge in Michigan. We have the Kirtland's warbler, but we also have a number of other species and warblers coming through of all sorts, migrating through Michigan or staying in Michigan through the summer. They're great songs to hear, and there's raptors of all sorts, owls, hawks, bald eagles. Sometimes we get golden eagles coming through. So all of that you can do in the Pigeon River Country. And of course, the Pigeon River Country. It is named for the passenger pigeon. That was once prevalent, and we did the episode with Kyle Bagnall. Sorry, Kyle, I butchered your name. In October on the passenger pigeon. So we mentioned the Pigeon River Country. So this was birds all over Michigan, and birding's very popular. But along with that, hiking and backpacking, there's two really good backpacking trails in the Pigeon River Country. The shorter Shingle Mill Pathway, that's a 10, 12-mile hike. It's a nice overnight. Yeah, I mean, you can do it in one day as a day hike, but enjoy it and stay overnight while you're doing it. And that's part of the much larger High Country Pathway, which it's a 75-mile loop. It includes the Pigeon River Country, but it's a great hiking trail in northeast Lower Peninsula, and that's a several-day one, and you can do it with a few days right in the Pigeon River Country itself. So you can camp along on that trail, but you can camp in a lot of places in the Pigeon River Country. I mentioned dispersed camping, where you can kind of go out anywhere. You have to have a permit. It's free though, and there are regulations of where you can be located. You always have to be located more than 200 feet from a river, or they don't want pollution, anything washing down into the water there. So you definitely should follow that, especially if you have to dig a pit toilet or some other way to dispose of waste. So you don't want to pollute water for that. There are established campgrounds. There's a number of them on the Pigeon River itself. I think 3, I should say a number, but there's other campgrounds throughout. Pickerel Lake is popular. There's some other smaller campgrounds throughout. So that's definitely popular for camping along through there. Equestrian camping as well. There's 2 horse campgrounds, and that's because equestrian horseback riding is very popular within the state forest too. And it's common when you're driving along on the roads, or if you're hiking on some of the trails that are shared by horses, you're going to come across 4-legged traffic on those trails. And, you just, common courtesy, if you're in a car, if you have to pass them, go as far over as you can and go as slow as you can around there. The horses and the riders don't need to be eating your dust. And when you're hiking, be respectful for them. I always got off the side of the trail for the horses because I can stop a lot easier than they can, and I can get around, I can get off trail better than they can. So, again, use common courtesy. They're not going to try to, get in your way, not on purpose, that's for sure. There's mountain biking you can do in the forest, staying on established trails. Also motorized recreation, ORVs, ATVs, snowmobiles, but you need to stay on, permitted areas for doing that. And it's very popular throughout. But the last one I want to talk about here as we are nearing the end of the broadcast is forest bathing. Now, that's a term that's come out of Asia, Japan, I believe, and it's kind of just being out there, kind of communing with nature. And frankly, I've been doing this all my life. I'm not a religious person, but I feel I'm spiritual. But where I find that spiritual part for me is not inside a church. For those that do, that's fantastic. I find mine, though, elsewhere. I find mine in the forest. And one of my best Easter mornings was when I lived in Grayling and I'm working out at Hartwick Pines. And it was a beautiful spring day. It's, Easter in Michigan can be anywhere. Oh, I don't know if you're hearing that. I am sitting up in my dining room today broadcasting, and I can hear the chime of my mom and dad's old clock that is chiming here in the condo where I live. But forgot all about that. But anyway, so that's kind of the spiritualism, because that reminds me of my parents who are now passed away. But for me, Easter I don't remember the year, nice spring morning, and I decided I'm going out for a hike on Easter morning. And I'm out at Hartwick Pines, and I'm on this one trail, and I decide I need to get off the trail and I need to see what else is out there. It was an area of the forest. It's not where a lot of public are at. And so I step off the trail. I go off a little bit, and lo and behold, there's a ridge. I knew I was on top of a ridge, but off the trail a bit is where it goes down into kind of a hollow area. And it was just a perfect place. I sat down there in the leaf litter, a lot of pine needles, a lot of oak leaves down in that area there. And popping up through there were some wintergreen plants. And I could hear birds calling all around me, and the sun was warm. And I just sat there and kind of meditated and kind of got really into the feel of the forest. And I've talked about this before. How does the forest make you feel? I ask my guests, and that's just, it made me at peace. And so that's the kind of the forest bathing and being out in the forest. And there's many places to do that in the Pigeon River Country. In fact, there's even a private inholding in the forest. It's the I don't remember the name of the ranch, but it's a Buddhist retreat. And they've had, and I'll look it up again, and because in the final episode of this mini-series on the Pigeon River Country is going to be about some of the challenges. And this ranch is one of the challenges because it had a dam on the Pigeon River, and it caused a lot of problems over the years, and we'll get into that more. But Song of the Morning Ranch, I believe, is what it's called, and I could be wrong, but I'll have it corrected for the next episode. But that is a peaceful place for those to come to the retreat there, to meditate, to follow the Buddhist teachings, and they just so happen to have a bad dam there and they're on their property. But so yes, this is, you're coming to the forest as a retreat, as a place to kind of be in tune with nature in more of a spiritual way. And so that is very popular as a pastime as well in forests, including the Pigeon River Country. So recreations come in many forms. And the people who come to recreate in the forest come from all walks of life and all different areas of the country and of the world, because the birders who come to Michigan for the Kirtland's warbler, they're coming from all over the world to see the warbler, and then they're staying for extended periods to go birding in other locations, and that includes the Pigeon River Country. So Jimmy Carter is just one great example of one of these people who came from elsewhere. In his case, he's maybe the most famous person to have ever come to the Pigeon River State Forest. And I do advise people to read more about this. I can't do a whole lot of sharing from the book, from the magazine, because there is, copyright issues. But I do encourage you, if you are a fan of Michigan History Magazine or of Michigan history in general, to seek out the September-October 2024 issue of Michigan History Magazine. And you can usually find that, the current issues, you can usually find in bookstores in Michigan, but you can, find it online. The article might be available online, but this particular one, as I mentioned, September, October 24, it was volume 108, number 5, and the article written by Dianna Stampfler, and let me give you the correct article title of that. And that is The Big Wild, Jimmy Carter in Michigan's Pigeon River Country. And it's Dianna Stampfler, last name Stampfler. And I had actually interviewed with her once when she was doing a travel show on WJR radio years ago. And I was at Hartwick Pines, and we did an interview about some of the things at Hartwick Pines. But anyways, besides that, of course, there's also Jimmy Carter's book, An Outdoor Journal, Adventures and Reflections. And it was published in 1988 by Bantam Books. And as I mentioned, I found it as a used copy online. It was through a private seller, but I connected through Amazon. I know not everybody's a fan of Amazon anymore because of its owner, but it's still a great source for finding books and affordable. I'm not trying to plug Amazon. If you can find it through other outlets, do that as well. So it's a great book. And one of his chapters there is grouse hunting in Georgia and Michigan. And it's a great read. And I found other online sources for this article, and I will share that in my notes that are on the website with this, and hopefully it pops up on the other places that providers for the podcast. As I mentioned before, you can find it on Apple, on Spotify. If you're listening, I'm sorry, that's useless information. But anyways, I'll have all of this along on there. So give it a list, check it out if you want to learn more about all of these and you want to read the words that the people, spoke themselves or wrote that I can't share, specifically on here. So thank you for listening today. I hope you learned a little bit more about the Pigeon River Country and Jimmy Carter's grouse hunting experience and recreating in the Pigeon River Country State Forest. As always, if you enjoy the episode, if you enjoy the podcast, please share with others. And, if you can give a click on that support button, donate anywhere between $3 and $10 a month, and that helps keep the podcast on the air. And I can continue to expand this with more episodes and going farther ranging for what I can provide. So thanks again. And be listening for next week. Again, I've got an episode that's up in the air for next week. I got a couple of ideas, but I haven't settled on what it's going to be yet. So stay tuned next week for another episode of North Country History with Rob Berg. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye. North Country History with Rob Berg is hosted, written, and produced by Rob Berg. Music is Crack o' Dawn, performed by Reveille, licensed through Soundstripe. Follow North Country History with Rob Berg on YouTube and on Facebook at Rob Berg, Environmental Historian.